and welcome back to Chasing Hazel's Tales, a family history podcast presented to you by two registered nurses, all-around family historians, and sisters. If you got family history, we want to talk about it. I'm Kim McLaughlin.
And I'm Laura Ireland. We are still in Sleepy Hollow mode because we have a trip coming up.
That's right.
So we're just going to talk about a few more tidbits about that. And we've been researching the family in Sleepy Hollow, and it's been pretty fun and very fruitful. I've learned a lot and gone down a few rabbit holes. I don't know about you, Kim.
Yeah, many, too many. There's not enough time for all the rabbit holes that we have.
Yeah, probably break an ankle or something in some of those rabbit holes. But the history there is never ending, whether you are into family history or spooky folklore. You could spend your whole life researching that area.
And that's the truth. It is.
We may never get her out of there.
Yeah. I'm going to look for property while I'm there.
Kim, come back to the light.
No, I see my people. So, we've discussed before that we discovered many Dutch names and very large families that are intermarried. And it might be good to mention here that this community is almost the very definition of endogamy, or at least the community that was there in the early 1600s, 1700s. So endogamy is a genealogy term, and it refers to the custom of marrying only within the limits of a local community, clan, or tribe.
And do you think that might have been true in, like, not just here,
right,
in our country, but probably around the world?
Right. Historically, there are quite a few communities that you would call endogamous. And let's see, I think I have.
I don't like that word.
It's not a very good word, but it kind of takes away the sting of saying incest or something like that, because that's
well, it doesn't quite border on incest, right?
I mean, no, and that's
endogamy is extended relatives,
right? But they could be first cousins.
Oh, I don't even want to hear that.
Yeah, there are first cousins, but there are some groups which include, according to Wikipedia, Jewish, Polynesians, Low German Mennonites, Amish, Acadians, or Cajuns as they're called, French Canadians, and many people from Arab countries, and people from Newfoundland, they say. But usually if you have an island group, it's hard. Families would have large families, 8-10 people, and it wouldn't be unusual for brothers and sisters to marry the brothers and sisters of other groups and of other families. I mean, it's almost hard to avoid. Hard to find people that aren't related. I guess. And they choose to do that sometimes just because of sometimes religion, and people have the same customs and things, and they prefer to be with their own group of people. But so anyway, we would certainly find that in Sleepy Hollow, because once I started getting the tree back enough, I'm going, that one, those two brothers married those two sisters, and now we have cousins that are marrying each other. But it doesn't have the same ring, but it is called endogamy. So some of the names that we have that are from the Dutch group from the Westchester County in New York are the Storm family, the Willems or the Williams. We have the Van Tassels, the Orsers, which is from my husband's family, the Eckers, Ecker, de Groot, Van Kortenbush, and it goes on. Did I miss any that you can think of right off?
Just the Van Wart.
Oh, the Van Warts. Yeah, right, because that's big in our family as well, Van Wart.
Mm-hmm. So the biggest name that sticks out to me when you go through that list is the Van Tassel family. That catches most people's attention due to the Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. That was written in 1820. And of course, over the weekend, we had a really nice chat with Robert Van Tassel, who lives in the area. He's a very distant cousin. I'm sure he wouldn't even match on...
No way. We wouldn't find him on a DNA.
Yeah, no.
Anywhere.
On Ancestry, we wouldn't even show up.
No.
But he's very knowledgeable about the family in Westchester County. He can just zip those names right off. He can go all the way back, all the way to the area where we have common ancestors in the 1700s.
Right. And he could spout them off by memory.
Right.
Which I cannot. Well, sometimes I can, but not this far back. But
yeah. And that's where our family lines do connect at the Sergeant Isaac Van Tassel line. Right. That person was born in 1745. And the Van Tassel family was one of the earliest families to settle in New York.
Right. They have a very large family, still some family there. And it's really nice to talk to him because there's a lot of history there.
Yeah, stuff I never would have.
No,
I mean, I didn't even know we had Dutch ancestry going back that far.
I also kind of thought it was from our German line, but it's not. It's from the other line. And so, yeah, there's a whole new world of information that I have yet to go through, but we have some pretty interesting tidbits today. And so the Katrina Van Tassel, which is mentioned in Washington Irving's book, we are going to be heading to that cemetery because the muse, if you want to call it that, for that character in his book was from the Van Tassel family and from that area. So we're heading to that cemetery, and most historians will think that Eleanor Van Tassel was probably the real life embodiment of Katrina Van Tassel in the book.
Right, because Washington Irving actually did stay with the Van Tassel family in Sleepy Hollow, which I think at the time was even called North Tarrytown.
Right.
Like Sleepy, it didn't have,
right.
Sleepy Hollow is really just an area,
right,
almost. So he lived there and he knew the Van Tassel family. And so he would probably draw from these people, the knowledge of these people to make his characters.
He's also buried, Washington Irving is also buried in Sleepy Hollow. So there's a character, Eleanor Van Tassel, and her aunt, Eleanor's aunt, is Katerina Van Tassel. So those two people together, we think, are a combination, which is how he got that character. He used the name of one, but the embodiment of the other, because his description of Katerina was more like Eleanor. So that's what historians think. You're making someone up. You just put two people together. But I want to check out Katerina's grave is in the Old Dutch Church burial ground.
Right. I wonder how well you can see, the inscriptions on the headstones.
So I've looked on Find a Grave, which is a website that all the graves are put on there. And the pictures of her stone look pretty bad. It might be the quality of the photo. So for you and I, we have to go check it out ourselves is what we got to do.
Yes, we will need to go and look.
Yeah, not that we'll do anything to it, but we want to. But maybe people take care of it and repair it as time goes on. I don't know.
Right. So as I was doing a little bit of research here, looking at the characters, it just kind of makes you a little angry when they describe the Katrina Van Tassel characters. She actually has no voice in the story. She's only described as a prize to be won in the typical of like 19th century literature, I guess, that she is
like
a prize
heifer.
A prize heifer. Yeah, basically. She's described, she's manipulative and spoiled and uses her charms to manipulate, and she's merely a prop. And her voice is she has no voice. She's only seen through the lens of the male characters.
Right. That want to win her over and win her father's estate.
Right. Because of course she can't inherit it.
Right. So she has to get married, and some man's going to have to come and take care of that for her. So yeah.
So in today's world, it's kind of a rough thing to read, but it's different time. But anyway, it'll be interesting to go and see all of that stuff. And it was just a story, so I guess I'll get over it.
Yeah. I'm not sure. It's sounding pretty rough right now.
But it did reflect the times. It did used to be that way.
Yes.
Yeah. And the other thing I found in researching it was that the Van Tassels did have a connection to the actual Headless Horseman.
Do tell.
The Hessian, the person that they think the Headless Horseman is kind of based on was a Hessian soldier who did get his head blown off.
Cannonball, right?
By a cannonball, yeah. And that soldier had previously helped out the Van Tassel family when there was a fire or something, and he had taken the baby and wrapped it up and put it in a shed somewhere where there wasn't fire, and it actually saved the baby's life.
Wow.
And Cornelius and Elizabeth Van Tassel were very grateful to that Hessian soldier for saving their baby's life.
Right. So
Just-
the Hessians were fighting for the British, right?
Yes,
And the Van Tassel's loyalties were with the British, so they would have crossed paths.
right, probably.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Good story.
Weird little tidbit.
Yep.
All right. So then also the Van Wart family, or in some places I guess it's pronounced that way, but some places it's spelled Van Wert,
Right.
with 2 E's.
I think there's many iterations of it.
Oh, all these names were mangled.
Yeah. Many
many
times.
times.
We're going to call
Yeah.
it Van Wart
Van
because that's
Wart.
all we got.
Yeah. A big takeaway from our research is the fact that our 6 times great grandfather, Jacob Van Wart, owned 1 enslaved person, as noted in the 1790 census. And we discussed the heavy slave trade last week. And of course, 1 is 1 too many. And we did look on the entire sheet that this was on, and other families owned them as well, including more relatives. There was a David Storm, a Nicholas Storm, and the most any one family owned on that sheet was 6. Most of them were 1 enslaved person per family, but just a comparison to see how common it was at the time. And it's a very sad finding.
Yeah. We watch Finding Your Roots. That's our favorite thing. And and the thing with Dr. Gates is he always tends to find some family that has, oh, did you know you have a slave in your family or whatever? It's there's a slave census or whatever. We never consider ourselves that way because we're here in Maine, way up in Maine, and I don't recall if there were slaves. I've never heard of them, but
right. And you don't think, like, if you don't come from money,
right,
and you think, how would your people have
yep,
owned any slaves or anything? So
we didn't have big farming,
right,
areas per se. Anyway, so it, for me, I never even give it a thought. I gave much a thought. So now all of a sudden it's like, well,
yep, we're in that group too.
So pretend I'm Dr. Gates. I'm gonna say,
yeah,
how do you feel about that? What's it like knowing your family had slaves, and like all of a sudden we're in that chair, like, wow,
just like them. It's very sobering.
It's very sobering. And yeah, so we were discussing that last week, and so here we are. Our family, several members of our family, and it was very common, like you said, during that time period to have that. So one thing I wanted to mention for clarification so last week we did talk about the slave trade and how the Phillipsburg Manor, which was right there in Sleepy Hollow, was used as a port. The family was in the slave trade. So they just said that it had a very large impact on slavery in American colonies. The Phillipsburg Proclamation is when Sir Henry Clinton made this proclamation because he was staying at the Phillipsburg Manor. He took it over during the Revolutionary War, and he made a proclamation. And what I said last week was very confusing to me and to Laura because I had taken it out of context, I guess. And
we confuse ourselves.
We
often.
do that because, they use big words. And, so I had to stop and think about it, and I looked it up. But so what basically the Phillipsburg Proclamation did, and Sir Henry Clinton ordered, so to speak, was that if there are any Negroes that's what they called them in the proclamation, was Negroes. If there are any Negroes that are fighting, if you're fighting for the Patriots, then if we find you, we're going to sell you. But if you escape and come to the British side, we will set you free. We will give you your emancipation. That is what the Phillipsburg Proclamation came down to. So that makes more sense. So what they're trying to do is to get the Negroes to leave the Patriots, so it would just reduce their forces, and it would give the Negroes a reason to defect and to come to the other side. So that makes more sense to me. Does that make sense to you?
It does. It does.
Come to the British and we'll set you free.
Yep.
If we win.
Yeah.
Should put that in parentheses, if we win. But anyway, so that was what that was all about. And that was happening right in the very area that our family was living. And so they did have slaves there. And so did they fight for the British? I don't know. I bet there's research done on that somewhere. And so, and while I was doing all this online, next thing you know, I get a thing on my phone, a ding. Oh, by the way, so familysearch.com, which is the Mormon website, I subscribe to that, and I have a family tree on that. They said, hey, we've got a lot more Revolutionary War records for you. Come see us. So they must have known I was researching stuff and said, come back, we've got more for you. So yeah, they know what I'm doing.
Well, good. Okay. So, and we also have found, we've really kind of discovered a lot this week.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
All of this stuff with New York has been very interesting. And there's the connection to the Native American Sachem Catoneras. I think I'm saying that right.
I think you are too. I think yeah. Yay.
Yay, me.
Yeah.
From Long Island, New York. She was born in the early 1600s. And we got this lead from our conversation with Robert Van Tassel and had to follow up because, of course, where our ancestry with him meets in the 1700s. And then we have common ancestors before that.
Right.
So she was the only daughter of the leader of the Montauk tribe, and she was held in very high esteem. And the role of sachem, which is loosely defined as chief, was often passed on by a deceased husband or father. And of course, the Native Americans were smart enough to pass that on to their daughters as well as their sons.
They honored their women. They did. They were in I think they did. That's the sense I get. That's another research project altogether.
Yeah. I'm going to roll with it anyway.
Yeah.
And it's thought that she obtained her sachem from her father.
And so our mother went to school in Old Town High School, and wasn't their yearbook called the Sachem?
It was, because their mascot was the Indian.
Right. Which it isn't anymore. Yeah.
Do you recall what she told us, that as a child she was insulted by her sisters?
Right.
Because she had skin that browned up really good in the summer.
She had really dark skin. Yeah.
She tanned so well, and they would call her Indian.
Yeah.
And it was an insult at the time, unfortunately.
Yeah. And relationships relationships with natives have always been up and down, up and down. And at the time, my mother was like, I'm not an Indian,
Yeah.
And it turns out she probably was.
But
that's another story.
Another story, but at the time in the 1940s, early 50s or whatever it was considered an insult. And anyway, but
that's how they would just tease and
sisters do, and siblings or whatever.
Yep. But anyway, let's get back to Catoneras from Long Island. So for the most part, back early 1600s, it was frowned upon for the Dutch settlers to mix with the natives. And by saying frowned upon, that's putting it mildly. So scholars have found the horrible accounts of the treatment of the offspring of these relationships. So most times the children would be raised by the tribe because the Dutch had big problems taking in mixed race children. And it was probably pretty obvious if you think about it. If you think about Dutch, they were pretty light colored, I would think. And
pretty
then
pale,
yeah, they did not take the mixed race children in. And there were accounts of Dutch soldiers killing their old children rather than raising them in shame. So for the most part, the tribes would raise these children. So the native ladies would become with child, and they would raise their own children without the Dutch help, or and there was probably no marriages to begin with. So I did get this information from a website, and it was from Stony Brook College, and it was called So
Whitney,
it's
Whitney almost went there.
Is that right? Really great. Really great website. And so that's where I got a lot of this information. And so they did say the norm when the Dutch and the Native Americans, they were in the same lands, and they met and they mingled, but they didn't admit to it, put it that way. But there were exceptions, and one was
stalking.
Yeah, that's right. So they Facebook stalked, but there were exceptions, and this article went on to say that was Catoneras, because she was the sachem of the Montauk tribe, and she was very well known, and so people would know about her having relationship.
So yes, she had the son with the Dutch settler, named Cornelius Jansen van Texel or Van Tassel. The son, Jan Cornelissen,
Yeah.
I can mangle names all day long. He was raised in a Dutch household, but it does not appear that Catoneras married Cornelius, nor is there any evidence that she lived with him in the Dutch settlement. Because she was buried on Indian land or Native American land.
Yep, in a native burial ground.
Yeah.
Right. And I even found it on Find a Grave. I don't know if there's a stone there. I don't feel like going to Long Island this weekend, but I won't. I don't feel like going this weekend, but that doesn't mean I don't want to go.
That doesn't mean we're ruling it out.
That's right. Let's talk to our driver. But they do say that she is there, but I'm not. And Robert Van Tassel this weekend said he wasn't sure if there was a stone there or not. But
that from that picture, it's hard to tell. That it looks like there are small stones, but you don't know if they're engraved or
their customs probably of having gravestones is probably totally different. And these would be
different
so
practices. Yeah.
Right. And so this is really just interesting because everybody says they have a Native American princess in their tree. Everybody, you ask anybody, oh yeah, well, we had an Indian princess that one of my grandmothers, and it might be true, but there's a bunch of scholars who say probably not, you didn't have a princess. But the research that was done on this, and which is listed in this article, that I will put a link to, it seems pretty legit. What the article does say is
I can buy a crown. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it's probably not a crown. It's probably something more like a headdress of some sort. Unless you're talking about the English crown.
Well,
yeah. So it's the Van Tassel family, they said, historically, who has spearheaded most of this research because it does involve their family. There is written documentation about these people and you'd have to read the whole thing to get into it. But it makes me feel like this could be a legit, inference that we probably do have Catoneras on our family tree.
And is that in that Dutch society?
Nope. It would be
thing?
Let me
is
see.
It the Holland? What was that thing called?
It's called, well, no, not the Holland Society. It would be the website that I just used was called, and there might be stuff on there called from the Holland Society that talks about this, but where I got my information was a website called the Long Island History Journal.
Oh,
so
that goes about as far back as American history goes.
It does.
The written history. Yeah.
Right. So they're saying that there's evidence that Catoneras left land that was hers on Long Island to her son, the Dutch son. I think she may have only had maybe one son. I'm not sure. But and they put a lot of this information to the academic test, and it seems possible. To me, it's more possible than General Johnny, put it that way.
There must be so many descendants.
Yeah.
I mean, this is from early 1600s.
Right. Right. And can you imagine? I mean, all the Van Tassels. We're not even a Van Tassel. We descend from them, but I mean, Robert and all his cousins, and you know.
I mean, we are, but it was the female. Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we married out.
Yeah.
So it was just an unexpected finding. And we thank Robert Van Tassel for, he kind of had mentioned it before, but I just didn't put a lot of effort into it at the time because I was doing other things. But, so I'm wondering if Andrew is related then. I'm not sure. But I am certainly now going to go and finish this line so that we can have her in our tree fully and with some documentation along the way. Right now, it's just a research line, but I want to put it out there that, she was one of our grandmothers. And guess how many grandmothers she is from us? Did I show you earlier?
You might have shown, I don't know, 8?
10. She's our 10th time great grandmother. Catoneras. I don't even have a long last name for her. I'm calling her Catoneras Montauk. I mean, she's from Montauk.
Well, did Native Americans have? I mean, they didn't.
I guess not.
Their naming was different,
right? So that was the biggest.
I'm still blown away by the fact that on Mom's side, both somebody drove the Mayflower and somebody was on Long Island
with
in the
Dutch.
1600s. Yeah,
between Native and Dutch.
Yep.
And so
that's crazy.
That only lends credence to our ancestry.com DNA findings. So if you go and look for your roots, where our settlements were in the United States,
yes, our communities,
they are right there.
Yep.
So that was our big finding in doing. Just look, all we wanted to know was how the Headless Horseman was doing, or, or I was interested in Dirk Storm, that kind of thing. And I got into the Van Tassels, and now it's just really quite interesting and digs you right into the middle of the history of that whole area, between the slaves, between the Dutch, between the natives, between all of that. It is eye-opening.
Very eye-opening.
Yep. I'm not sure how we can top that, but we're going to try this weekend.
Yes.
We're showing up. Things are going to get real.
Going to walk around Sleepy Hollow. Do you know who I am?
Oh, I bet they do. Yeah. Anyway, so I mean, we so want to thank Robert. He was so,
yes, and special thanks.
And he's not much into computer work as far as documenting it this way, but he's got it all up in his head, and he can just spit it out, and he's so knowledgeable. And we appreciate everything that he did for us this weekend and just giving us a chat. And it was fun.
Yep, we had a good time chatting with him.
So we're not going to be here next week because we got things to do. We're not recording unless something really really fun. And maybe we will next Monday night or something. But until then, we'll let you know. And you'll be watching on social media because we'll put some.
Yeah, we'll probably put some little clips up or something. We'll put pictures and let you know what we're doing, what we see.
And it's supposed to be a nice weekend.
Especially if we see a Headless Horseman.
Well, I'm going to show you Laura running down the street, screaming.
With my foot in a boot running. With my broken foot.
Laura, just so you know, Laura has a broken foot.
Yes. So I'll be hobbling.
Yeah, she'll be hobbling. She's not running from any Headless Horseman. I will be. And the fastest
I'm gonna lose. That's right. I'm gonna lose.
Okay.
All right. I'll sacrifice myself.
You darn tootin'.
That's right. Well, until next time, please rate, review, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We also invite you to reach out to us by email at chasinghazelsTales@gmail.com. Tell us your tales or share what you've learned or found interesting about your family. Let us know if you've shaken your family tree and had a few nuts fall out. But if you haven't seen any nuts fall out of the tree, you might just be the nut in your family. You can also follow us or contact us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok. Until next time, bye-bye.
See you later.